I thank you again for coming here tonight to honor David and Nomi, Mandy, and the memory of Arthur Stern. And I thank you for supporting Americans for Peace Now and Shalom. As I previously mentioned, tonight, Americans for Peace Now will be inaugurating the Arthur Stern Leadership Award. Arthur, who you'll hear more about in a moment, is a longtime national board member and executive committee member of Americans for Peace Now, and also was the chair and co-chair of APN Southern California region. APN feels privileged to have had Arthur's support and leadership, and now to establish an award in his name. Rabbi Leonard Beerman, who throughout his long and prestigious career has been a leader in the application of the ethical values of Judaism related to the quest for peace and justice, and a friend of the recipients, David and Nomi, will now present the Arthur P. Stern Award to Rabbi.
Stolzenberg. Arthur Stern, Zichrono Bracha, with his extraordinary life and all of its transformations, David and Nomi, with the excellence of their achievements, each with a curriculum vitae that strains against the boundaries of my computer. All evidence can be found there for the qualities of leadership that make them the natural and inevitable recipients of this leadership award. Arthur, David, and Nomi. Hold those names together for a moment. What comes to your mind when you think about them and what they've stood for in their lives? When I do that, here on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, what first comes to my aging mind are the words of the leading rabbi of Germany when Hitler came to power, Rabbi Leonard Beerman, who said, a spirit is characterized not only by what it does, but no less by what it permits, what it forgives, what it beholds in silence. Silences. One has to take responsibility for one's actions, and that includes one's words. And one silences, yes, one silences, for silences rise to heaven as well. And we know that Arthur and David and Nomi have refused to be silent about the most contentious issues that agitate Jews in our time, the very ones addressed by Americans for Peace Now, not the least of which are the rights of the Palestinians, a protest against their rights being trampled upon, and the humiliation they have endured through 47 years of Israeli occupation. Somehow they have sought to combine protest with love, for they are all Ohavei Yisrael, lovers of Israel. And thinking of silences and protest and something to love about Israel, my mind moves to the words of the great Israeli poet, considered by many to be the outstanding woman poet of the Hebrew language, Dalia Ramakovich. And one of her best-known poems, many of you will know it, is entitled Hovering at a Low Altitude. And in this poem, there is a female narrator who presents herself in a very satirical way as witness to the rape and murder of an Arab shepherd child. The narrator watches from the safe distance of a low altitude and does nothing. As she watches, she says, "I'm not here." She sees the little girl, and yet she says over and over again, "I'm not here." The image of hovering in this poem, the Hebrew word is rechifa, contains a double meaning, connecting the language of army bulletins, low-flying helicopters in hovering formations over the Gaza Strip, with Tel Aviv slang, where rachef means to be cool by staying detached from the political situation. The image of low-altitude hovering over an atrocity is an emblem of the situation of the ordinary, in this instance, the ordinary Israeli citizen, knowing but choosing not to see certain terrible acts being perpetrated. It is primarily a parable of the moral untenability of detached observation. Not so for David and Nomi. Not so for Arhur as well. What I have seen in my friends David and Nomi is a need to respond, a need to answer. Robert Pinsky, the celebrated American poet, in an essay called The Responsibilities of the Poet, wrote something that applies to David and Nomi and perhaps to us as well. He said, "An artist needs not so much the audience as to feel the need to answer a promise to respond. The promise may be a contradiction, it may be unwanted, it may be unheeded, but," he said, "it is owed." Is that not what we have seen in them and in us at our very best? We feel a need to answer with the choices we make, what we see, what we teach, what we do, the moral decisions about how we shall live. And the answer we give may be a contradiction of what goes on about us. Sure, it is often unwanted, unheeded, yet we feel, do we not? And they, Nomi and David, felt that it is owed. We are called to it, so that however we may fail by the customary measure of success, this need to answer is as firm in us as anything can be. I look at my friends, David and Nomi, and I sense that what they're really seeking to express in their lives is integrity. Integrity in the way they live and think and act, and they want to be able to hold up an image of integrity precisely at a time when we all have a concern about the moral condition of our own society. They want to give a vision of the world to their daughters. They want to be part of a vision that they can give to Tali and Noah and Sarah and to all of us. And what have they done for us? To speak of my debt to them, our debt to David and Nomi, I borrow some words from Stephen Sondheim's Sunday in the Park, George, where Mandy Patinkin, who immortalized the leading role in that musical, has these words sung to him. This is what David and Nomi have done for us. Opened up our eyes, taught us how to see. Look at all the things you gave to us. let us give to you something in return. So I'm honored that I can be the one to present to them something in return, because we belong to each other. A beautiful menorah, which Americans for Peace Now, in honor of Arthur Stern, and in honor of David and Nomi, and I ask them both to please rise now.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you to everybody for coming. Thank you especially to the organizers of this event, to Peace Now, and to its leaders. We are both really incredibly grateful and moved. I will say that when we were told that we were to be the joint recipients of this incredible honor, I had two immediate reactions simultaneously. I can only say one and then the other. So let's say first was just a feeling of immense gratitude and honor to be connected with the name and the memory of Arthur Stern and Arthur Stern's family. I grew up, I came of age, I guess you could say, in the very cynical 60s and really 70s by the time I was sentient, when the idea of having a moral hero or there being moral heroes was just a kind of laughable, ridiculous idea, and that kind of language just was very hollow to me for most of my life. But meeting Arthur Stern, whom David met in their joint work with many progressive Jewish causes, particularly over the endless agony of Israel. I remember when David first spoke about Arthur with such awe and admiration, and then when David brought Arthur and Edith home, and our whole family just fell in love with them immediately. And Arthur is a hero to me. He is that thing that I had been led to believe was a silly illusion. But I just have such immense admiration as well as affection. And to be connected with his memory is simply a great honor. So that was my first sentiment, and I thank all of the Sterns, and it is a wonderful thing to be connected in any way with Arthur's memory and legacy. My second thought was, I do not deserve this honor. Not out of modesty, but because unlike Arthur and unlike David, I am not a leader in any conventional or any sense. I am not a leader. I am not a public figure or a public speaker. I have not stood up on this side of the podium in the important and courageous ways that both Arthur and David have modeled for us. If I have any right to be here, I think I can fairly say that I probably speak for the larger majority of people in this room who are usually on that side like I am, which is where I really like to be. But I think those of us who usually are on that side of the podium, we've gathered in these rooms, and sometimes they're really tiny and they're like 3 or 4 people. And on a wonderful day like today, there are hundreds of people. We've gathered for decades to share a really agonized sense of conflict over the conflict. And I think most of us, certainly myself, but I know I'm not the only one. I don't know if we're a silent majority, but we are a significant body of people who I think oftentimes find ourselves just completely at a loss for words and completely tongue-tied by the excruciating sense of conflict. And many of us have spent our adult lives feeling like we've been bearing witness to the steady unraveling of a pretty utopian dream. And we're tongue-tied because, on the one hand, we bear witness and we feel, in the ways that Leonard talked about, that we must bear witness and acknowledge and take moral responsibility for atrocities and terrible things that are being done. But at the same time, we feel so alienated from anti-Israel. And it's a very, very difficult space to be in. And we've all been in that space for a long time, and I think that is why we are so grateful to people like Arthur and David, who are able, in these really agonized moments, be able to come on this side of the podium and somehow put into words that agonized sense of conflict and speak to both sides. And I don't mean both sides of I mean the internal conflict. So maybe there's some reason for me to be on this side of the podium today. And so I think I will end there. I should say something uplifting. I should express my gratitude. I will say this. I'll try to. You know, my adult life began when I graduated high school, and I spent a year in Israel on kibbutz in 79 to 80, the Kabonim, Shabbat Kabonim. And that was pretty early with Shalom Achshav. Those were the days when people would actually still go around greeting each other by saying, Shalom, Shalom Achshav. And I guess I will just close by saying, you know, it's easy to say nothing's gotten better, but things have gotten clearer thanks to organizations like Shalom Achshav, and thanks to voices like Arthur's and David's. And what has changed is there is a much, much more robust community and organizational manifestation of the voices of people like those of us in this room who are conflicted and who remain deeply, deeply attached to Israel and to that dream, but won't let that prevent us from bearing witness. So I'm very grateful to Shalom Achshav and to Americans for Peace Now and for everyone here who has participated in sustaining that collective voice and vision. So thank you very much.
I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to Americans for Peace Now and to David Pine, who has labored indefatigably to make this dinner happen. Thank you very much. I realize that I'm all that stands between you and dinner, and more importantly, from the headline act, to whom I feel a deep bond, and that is because I come from Scranton, Pennsylvania. Which is unusual. And here in 2 weeks, Mandy Patinkin will be appearing in Scranton. Tickets are available through Ticketmaster. My mother will be at the event. I encourage all of you who are in the Scranton area to make your way to Scranton.
I'll arrange a bus.
Like Nomi, I feel really that I don't deserve this honor at all. And I'm accused of many things, and false modesty is not one of the things. But I really do mean that. All I do, I think, is use the tool of my trade, which is the metaphoric pen, to try and articulate a Jewish moral stance. The net effect is to make Jews very angry at me. So if this is an award intended to go to those who make Jews angry at them, I think of Arhur in this context, then I suppose I'm a worthy recipient of the Nomi. But what I really want to do is express thanks to three people. First, I must, and am deeply honored to express thanks to my beloved friend and mentor and inspiration, Rabbi Leonard Beerman. In a career that spans over 70 years, Leonard has instantiated that biblical proposition, Kishmo Kenu. As his name, so is he. He has been lion-hearted in defense of the most exalted moral values of the Hebrew prophetic tradition. He has cajoled us, he has challenged us, he has inspired us to bring those values to fruition. And I just want to stand here and express my thanks for the inspiration that example has offered. Thank you so much. Second on my list, in a career that spans only 32 years, so by Romanian standards quite short, Nomi Stolzenberg has been my confidant, my chief conversation partner, and my best friend. On our second date, we went to a meeting of the Progressive Zionist Alliance, constituting 50% of the attendees. The population of the organization has declined somewhat since then. Nomi has imparted to us, and I mean to me and to our three daughters, an extraordinary mix of love, kindness, and searing brilliance. The hand-wringing sessions that we've had in order to allow me and her to find that voice that I spoke of. So thank you. And Acharon Chaviv, last but not least, the other person in Los Angeles before whose name I always append two words. The first one is Leonard Beerman, and this is absolutely true. You can ask my daughters. Arthur Stern was the other person before whose name I always appended the two words, the great, as in the great Arthur Stern. The great Leonard Beerman. It wasn't only that Arthur was pioneering, extraordinarily innovative electrical engineer who ascended to the position of president of the International Organization of Electrical Engineers, some 12,000 strong, if I'm not mistaken. And it wasn't only that Arthur was a spellbinding storyteller, historian, attesting to the Hungarian Jewish experience, beginning on an almost hourly basis on 19 March 1944 when the Germans entered Hungary. Arthur would keep us in absolutely rapt attention for hours on end as he described every day from 19 March 1944 to his transport out of Budapest to the concentration camp Bergen-Belsen as a member of the Costa Transport, and then to freedom in Switzerland. It wasn't only that. Arthur represented the perfect mix of qualities in a Jewish leader. What were those qualities? First, erudition. Here's my friend Chaim. I remember Arthur Stern in the minyan that you and Doreen used to have in your house. A minyan, a prayer quorum of rabbis, professors, graduate students, intellectuals. And then in the midst of the conversation, this hand would go up, and a silver-haired man would issue forth with the most extraordinary commentary on the Bible, mixing Aramaic, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, German, and French. All for the purpose of edification, not ostentation. That was Arhur Stern, a Talmid Chacham in the true sense. Quality number one. Quality number two is courage. Arhur insisted on challenging the establishment when he found it deficient in its quest for justice. He was a contrarian, but not only a contrarian. He was a purposive contrarian. A contrarian in order to fight for justice. He really embodied an ideal that I remember being imparted so well from another great hero in my life, my grandfather of blessed memory, whom I remember telling me, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. That was Arthur's belief in its purest form. The courage to challenge. And the third quality, which sort of brought it all together. Arhur insisted on belonging to the community. It would have been very easy for him, with his anti-establishmentarian, contrarian position, to stand outside. Arhur insisted, oh no, I'm here. I belong. I care passionately about the Jewish condition. I care passionately about the Jewish commonweal. And no one will exclude me from the bounds of this community. I insist on my right of membership. Those qualities together constitute, for me, almost the perfect model of a Jewish leader. And I was so deeply privileged to see it in action in the person of our beloved friend, Arhur Stern. Kishmo Kenhu. As his name, so is he. Arhur Stern, Stern, star. Arhur is a lodestar to us, challenging us, guiding us to that position of justice to which we are eternally struggling. What would he say about today? He would say the situation is dire, but not hopeless. He would not shield his eyes from the injustice. He would not conceal or dilute that which he saw. He would tell us we may not be required to conclude the task, but we certainly can't desist from engaging in it. And what I want to conclude with is a word, a set of words actually, that Arhur imparted to us in his last days when we went to visit him as he was bedridden and he could barely speak. And we had nonetheless a remarkable exchange with him, a really remarkable exchange. And at a certain point he summoned our youngest daughter Sarah to him, who was about to become a bat mitzvah, and Arhur knew he wouldn't be there at her bat mitzvah. And he uttered only two words. Jackie, you remember them very well. Nisim v'niflaot. Miracles and wonders. Very enigmatic. May we live to see the miracles and wonders that Arhur prophesied. And may we, in fact, walk in the path of wise and courageous activism that he so powerfully modeled. Thank you very much.